Hi, this is David Mack, and you're listening to the FSF Podcast.
Welcome to the FSF Podcast. We were going to write the intro for today's guest, but instead, Tim decided just to use the bio intro from his website. Because what's a little plagiarism between friends? So our guest is the New York Times best-selling author of 38 novels of science fiction, fantasy, and adventure. His writing credits span several media, including television for episodes of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, games, and comic books. He has worked as a consultant for Star Trek Prodigy, and in June of 2022, the International Association of Media Tie-In Writers honored him as a Grand Master with its Faust Award. Welcome to the show, David Mack.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We are so glad you could be here. And as we said before, it's a little weird. Usually Tim does all of that, and I'm a little out of breath now. I don't know how he does that. Like, that's a lot of words.
But, yeah, it's a lot of words.
It's hard.
Words are hard. Yeah. But, I mean, I guess the arrival of your first grandson is a reason to miss the show. So we'll send our congratulations to Tim's family on the healthy arrival of the little one, which is not so little.
He's a grandpappy now.
I know. When he messaged us today, though, his grandson is 10 pounds. That's not a little baby.
No, that's a full-size regulation bowling ball.
Right. Yeah. That's a sack of potatoes right there.
Yeah.
But yes, we, as the FSF Podcast, again, want to send our congratulations to Tim's family, even though it took Tim away from us. And now, who will I pick on? Oh, look.
Hi, hello.
So, David, out of your 38 published novels, there's the soon-to-be-released Star Trek Firewall. We are so grateful for the copy that you sent us to preview as well. That was amazing. But we're wondering if you could tell our listeners about the book and when they can get their hands on a copy of it.
Well, Firewall is a Star Trek Picard novel. It's a prequel. It is scheduled to come out on Tuesday, February 27, 2024. Depending on when this goes live into the world, the book may or may not already be out. And it's not technically embargoed, so if you're looking for it at your local bookstore, some bookstores might actually shelve it a little bit early. So it might be worthwhile if you're really, hankering for it. Go check your local Barnes & Noble or your local independent bookstore and see if they've already got a copy on the shelf. If you're ordering online or if you've had it pre-ordered in any format, then that will drop or be delivered on the 27th or shortly thereafter.
I'm very excited for it because, unfortunately, I don't live in the same state as everyone else, so I don't have the copy of the book. But my wife works at a bookstore, and they just got the shipment of it, like, maybe 2 days ago.
Ooh.
They're not going to shelve it until, like, the week it comes out, but I'm just sitting there like, I'm waiting. It's sitting there.
Can I just
They got their copies before I got my author copies. I still don't have copies of it.
Which is hilarious because Ben's in Alaska and they barely ever get anything on time up there.
You think it would be easy to get me copies, but no.
You would think. Oh,
yeah, there's no 2-day Amazon delivery in Alaska. It's more like 2.5 weeks.
I was going to say, your Prime delivery, you get it in 2 weeks instead of 3. So you said that this is a Star Trek Picard novel and that it's a prequel.
Yeah, it is set shortly after the end of the Star Trek Voyager TV series. So it takes place about 20 years, give or take, before the first season of Star Trek Picard. Star Trek Picard started in 2399 in the first season, and it went into about 2401 or later in the third season. So this story, Voyager comes home in 2378. And over the course of about 2 years after getting home, the Voyager crew scatters to new opportunities. Tom and B'Elanna have their kids, so they go off to start their family. Harry gets a new posting. Tuvok goes to Starfleet Command Security Division. Janeway becomes an admiral. The Doctor goes off on his speaking tour, advocating for holographic sentient rights. Chakotay gets promoted, according to Star Trek Prodigy, to command of the Protostar project, the USS Protostar. So he's, involved in this top secret project. Everybody's got this cool stuff going on, except Seven of Nine. Here she is. She's been promised, a new life in the Federation after the ship gets home. And instead, the found family she's relied on is gone. The only person who's really still around is Janeway. And suddenly, Seven is finding she's actually not welcome here. This place that she doesn't really know. She's never really been to Earth, not that she remembers. She's not familiar with the Federation in terms of living in it. And she finds that they don't trust her, that this is only about 5 years after the events of Star Trek First Contact, when a Borg cube basically walked right up to Earth's doorstep and nearly destroyed the planet.
Right.
The people are a little edgy. They're a little wary of the Borg. And they haven't really, up to this point, ever dealt with an ex-Borg who has been emancipated after a prolonged period of assimilation. Sure, they know about Picard, but Picard was assimilated for a matter of hours. Seven of Nine was assimilated for over 18 years. So they're very wary of her. She's still got permanent Borg implants that can't be removed. They're a permanent part of her. She still has Borg nanoprobes in her blood. And so people, when they see her, she's visibly different. It's very obvious who and what she is. And they're afraid of her. And as a result, she faces persecution, bigotry, fear. As we see early in the book, she's living in a house on a beach down outside Cape Town, South Africa. And one day she gets up to find her house has been graffitied with "Die Borg Bitch."
Oh.
Hate graffiti on the side of her house. This is what cues her into the fact that Earth is not going to be the place where she's going to make a new life. She is not welcome here. And so she tells herself that, after all the efforts to get her into Starfleet that have been refused, and the efforts to get her Federation citizenship, which have been denied, that she doesn't want Janeway to keep going out on a limb for her. She says she's worried about, hurting Janeway's career prospects or hurting Janeway's reputation. But actually, that's a cover for the fact that Seven feels humiliated. She feels persecuted. She feels embarrassed. And so she's angry. She's angry as hell, and she just wants out of there. And so Firewall is a classic coming-of-age story, what in literary terms would be called a Bildungsroman, about her need to basically cut the apron strings that connect her to Janeway, go out into the galaxy for a long overdue journey of self-discovery to figure out who she is, what she wants out of life, who and what she wants to be, where she wants to do that, and basically, find her way to independence, which is what the coming-of-age story is all about. And so she has to go out into the galaxy, and suddenly she finds that, she's been deprived of all of the things we take for granted. The Borg stole her childhood, her adolescence, and her young adulthood. She's had 4 years of some socialization by the Voyager crew before coming back, but that's really just sort of barely scraping the surface. She has been deprived of all the things that we take for granted, like learning how to socialize, learning how to date, learning to navigate social situations. And suddenly she's also discovering, she's come from this very cis heteronormative sort of, period of acclimation to humanity aboard Voyager. But she's finding she's, on some level, she's queer. She's at the very least bisexual. And she's got to figure this out for herself without the guidance and the support of the network that she took for granted. So she's trying to figure out this aspect of herself on her own, and she's got nobody to talk to about it and nobody to help her through it. And so this is a story about Seven going out into the galaxy, finding herself, finding the truth of who and what she is. And along the way, she finds the Fenris Rangers, and in that finds a newfound family, sort of echoing the one she used to have. And in the course of doing that, she finds the first great love of her life, a woman named Ellery Cade.
I love it. I mean, Seven of Nine.
I was excited. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I was excited about it before. I'm so much more excited about it now.
You can read the preview and you can read the little blurb on the back, but there's something so much better about like hearing from the author's mouth this is what you can expect from this book. And it's like you can feel the passion in it a little more of the, hey, this is what I wrote, this is what I'm excited about. And
Yeah.
I feel like that hit a little harder than just the blurb you get on Amazon. But I'm really
Yeah,
excited. One.
yeah, the back cover blurb was one we chose because it kind of captured the feeling of ennui, of loneliness, of isolation that Seven is grappling with at the beginning of the story. But really, throughout the book, there's a high level of action adventure. There are a number of big action set pieces. And what's really important is that they are about putting Seven through a journey where she has to realize that solutions to problems out here in the rough and tumble frontier edge of Federation space are not always as cut and dry and black and white as they seemed when she was on Voyager. Things that would normally have been resolved, with a decisive action by Voyager, she finds out here you're dealing with people who play by a different rule book or no rule book. You're dealing with sociopaths. You're dealing with warlords, people for whom the only real law is vengeance. And you can't deal with these people the way you would have dealt with problems in Starfleet. So she's basically losing her illusions. She's losing that sense of innocence, and she's beginning to see some of the ugliness that happens out in the universe when you leave the comfortable space of the Federation.
It really does sound like, as you said, a coming of age story. I mean, 7 of 9 is fully grown up, but this sounds like you replace this with a teenager fresh out of school going off, like leaving their parents' house. You could have the same story.
Yeah, you can imagine she's a 17-year-old. I mean, she's physically 32 years old when we sort of join that part of her story where she's leaving home. Physically, yeah, she's 32, but she might as well be an adolescent. I mean, she's had, like I said, 4 years to be socialized by the Voyager crew, but that kind of just barely gets her to the point where she can interact on some sort of normal level with other sentient beings without offending everybody she meets or killing everybody she meets. That's a base level of socialization. That's now she's got to deal with how do you find a place to live when you've never done it before? How do you find a job when you've never had to go find a job before? How do you protect your identity when you realize if people figure out who and what you are, you could be subject to all kinds of violence. And a lot of the themes that run through the book, things that she has to suddenly worry about, like she realizes, like at one point, she's on this planet, a mining planet called, I believe it's Syrah, and she's staying in a city called Starheim. She realizes anybody she meets, probably one-on-one, she could win just about any fight. But if she has to face an angry mob, she's dead. So she knows this is not a place to draw attention. She keeps her head down. She stays anonymous at work. She stays out of arguments. She doesn't voice opinions about things. She just stays, on the liminal edge of society, mostly for a sense of self-preservation. And a lot of the themes that run through the book are those that are drawn from, the perspective of being the outcast, the outsider. There's themes about queerness and trans identity that also go through the book. In that Seven has become, thanks to Picard, but this was true even before that, she has been an icon for the LGBTQ community of Star Trek fans. She represents, someone who goes through a transitional identity. She doesn't like being dead named as Annika. That is one of her pet peeves. So there's, an allegory for the trans experience in that part of her daily life. And the fact that she is visibly different, that she has to deal with the fact that people can look at her and realize, she is not run-of-the-mill human being or whatever, humanoid, that she's got Borg implants and she can be immediately identified as different. That's, again, part of the queer and trans identity issue, is that, it makes for a very small, very vulnerable minority. And she's keenly aware of the fact that she has become a minority of one and therefore is in danger. So these themes go through the book. And it was very important to me that they be treated seriously because they are serious issues, particularly in the world we live in today.
That's a lot. That's just like, my brain took a minute with the processing, but
a lot is going on in this book. I won't lie to you. It's dealing with social issues. It's dealing with issues about queerness and transness. It's also just dealing with the general feeling of being the outsider, being the outcast. Uh,
Yeah.
and a lot of that is just about finding the commonality of human experience. The sort of romantic subplot that brings her to basically form a relationship with Ellery Cade. A lot of that is about Seven pushing past her own fear of vulnerability. But it's something I think we all identify with. That moment when the first time you really fall for somebody, and you've got to take a chance. At some point, you've got to put yourself out there and risk getting shot down if you're wrong, and that's a terrifying thing, especially if you've never done it before.
Yeah.
And so this is the sort of thing Seven is dealing with. She's trying to figure out how to navigate these waters. At one point, it's described in the text as she's watching basically people flirt while she's out at a dance club, a music club, and she realizes it's as if everybody else is speaking a language that she has never been taught, and she's trying to pick it up from context, but she can't. So that's again the sort of thing that's going on here.
I mean, with what you're describing, that's also very reminiscent of like neurodivergent people.
Yes,
like
that is also part of it.
Yeah, I have ADHD, and I'm also on the spectrum as well. I completely understand the fact that everyone is speaking a language you don't.
Yeah.
You either can't hear or just don't physically understand it.
Yeah,
So
or you don't get the subtle cues, the nonverbal cues.
Mm-hmm.
You're hearing the words, but you're not understanding the nonverbal part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up with OCD and also a disorder called TTM, trichotillomania, which was compulsive hair pulling. I used to destroy my beard when I was younger.
Is that what that is?
TTM is it's compulsive hair pulling. In men, it tends to manifest with the pulling of facial hair or from the top of the head. Women more frequently pull the top of the head, the eyebrows, or the eyelashes. Some people pull body hair. It manifests more often in women than in men. We're off topic here, but this happens.
Hey, that's fine.
It's sometimes referred to colloquially among those who have the condition as tricho. It's also known by the acronym TTM, trichotillomania. Tricho meaning hair, tilo meaning pull, mania meaning an uncontrollable desire or action. You're aware you're doing it, you don't want to be doing it, but your body does it anyway. So, yeah. So, I mean, I believe me, I have lived through neurodivergence, having to deal with that, having to deal with the fact that I have OCD tendencies, definitely somewhere on the spectrum myself. I've had to learn socialization the hard way. And I spent my youth basically being the favorite target of bullies. I was the one who could count on getting my ass kicked pretty reliably at school. And, through middle school and high school, if I wasn't getting my ass kicked, I was getting my personal belongings vandalized or getting my car graffitied, or, my parents would find that their house had been egged and I would know it's because the bullies were basically sending me a message. So, I mean, I grew up knowing what it is to be scared when you leave your house, knowing what it is to know that you are not welcome where you are. And I brought that sense of understanding the fear, the vulnerability, the sense of being the target to writing those scenes from Seven's point of view.
I feel like that's definitely the development of Seven's character that we need, though. We need to see that part of her so much more. Because, like you said, she's been an icon for the LGBTQ community for years, and then to get more of her backstory, get more of her personal development, I feel like that's going to be huge for the community.
I hope so, and I hope that members of the LGBTQ Star Trek fan community who pick up this book feel that I've done her character justice and have shown them the respect they deserve. Just as human beings, and that I've done justice to their experience.
Well,
I look forward to reading all of it.
I'm sure you've done a wonderful job, but only one way to tell, and that's to find it in your local bookstore, February 27th.
Or just sneak a copy, but from Mimi, because books are great.
Hey, could I go into the back room real quick? Just sit there with the book. All right. But we do have other questions.
Please.
That was just question one.
Hey, and look at we used half the show. I told you, long answers, my specialty.
Hey, we're fine at long answers. That was all beautiful stuff. But here we go. The majority of your writing career has been centered around Star Trek, with some ventures into Farscape and X-Men and a couple other things.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about Star Trek that keeps bringing you back? What attracts you into Star Trek?
Well, Star Trek was my first fandom love. It's what I imprinted on as a kid. It was the first major science fiction franchise that I was aware of as a child. I grew up watching the reruns, the syndicated reruns of the original series in the early 1970s. So I must have seen every original series episode 10 or 20 times by the time Star Trek the Motion Picture came out in 79, which for me at the age of 10 was a huge deal. I loved that. And I had the cutaway poster of the refit Enterprise from the motion picture, where they show you all the interior decks and where all the stuff is, and it's all got like a legend. I had that poster, and I loved that poster, and I studied it to the point where, by the age of 11, I could mentally, in my imagination, move through the interior of the Starship Enterprise and know where I was, and orient myself and know engineering is that way, the warp core is there, the energy goes through here, goes this way up into the nacelles, bridge is here, sick bay is here, main computer's here, and it became real to me. And so my imagination has been living, at least partly, in the Star Trek universe literally my whole life. I've grown up with Star Trek since the very beginning. And as far as my writing career, I pretty much owe it to Star Trek. My first professional writing credit in fiction was on television for Star Trek Deep Space Nine. That was where my writing career, in terms of anything other than, say, magazine work, nonfiction articles, which I had written before. But in terms of fiction, I started with Star Trek. And what I love about Star Trek is that it is a vision of a future we could build if we have the courage to do so, if we are willing as a species to put aside petty hatreds, if we're willing to put aside irrational beliefs and instead choose reason, choose compassion, and choose, basically this better future, we can have it, but you got to work for it. And I appreciate that vision that says tomorrow can be better than today if we are willing to say it's better to create than to destroy. It's better to heal than to harm. Peace is better than conflict. We should strive for understanding. We should celebrate the differences as long as those differences respect one another. We should be able to find a way forward in peace as one species of human beings, basically brothers and sisters all. And I love that vision of the future. It saddens me that it still seems so very far away. But what I think is important about Trek is that it stands there as a beacon. It stands there as an example to say, we can choose this. We haven't done it yet, but it's still here. This is the dream. It gives us something to aspire to a world and a future and a vision of humanity that's better than the one we have.
That is so... Sorry, literally just the whole thing you said was just perfect.
Thank you.
Because that is the epitome of Star Trek. My Star Trek growing up was Voyager, and I have the informational booklet of Star Trek Voyager. And when you were talking about going through the poster and finding all the same thing, I've poured through those pages, God, maybe 100 times or more. Like, I could map in my brain. It's been a while since I've read it, but I could probably, if I focus, I could probably map from like the bridge to the holodeck down to sickbay and just ping pong through the floor.
Yeah. And I could do that with the Enterprise D as well as with the original, movie era Enterprise. And I think on some level, it must be that I would have given anything to have lived on the Enterprise rather than in the world that I did. I would much rather have gotten up every day to find myself on the Enterprise than having to go to my high school.
Mm-hmm.
It was where I wanted to be. That was, it was one of those things where I had to get out of the small town I grew up in and go to New York City when I was 18 to attend film school. And it wasn't until I got to New York City that I really feel like I became the me I wanted to be, that I was the person that I wanted to be. And I came here without the baggage I'd grown up with. So, the reputation that I'd had there did not follow me here. And I was able to start fresh with a clean slate. And I became the person I wanted to be. And I feel like Seven is on a similar journey, and maybe I drew part of that inspiration from that, in that she cannot be the person she wants to be if she stays on Earth. The persecution she faces there, the baggage of her background is always going to taint her interactions with everybody around her, which is why she needs to get out. She needs to go to a place where she isn't known, where maybe people don't as quickly recognize what her implants mean. She needs to find that space where she can be herself and be judged on the content of her character and not the content of her implants.
Right. There is something to be said about a fresh start, a clean slate. Sometimes you just need to move and and get away from the people who know everything about you.
Yeah, that is definitely the case.
Yeah, I know when my husband and I got married, I moved across the state. And I mean, it's Michigan. It's not like it's that big of a state. It's a 3-hour drive from where I grew up. But there was something, even just in that 3 hours, that is so freeing of these are not the people that have known me since my parents brought me home from the hospital. These are the people who met me when my husband introduced us 6 months ago. Like, this is so much better.
Yeah.
Not that I don't love across state. It's just, it's nice to not have everybody know everything.
Yeah.
Same thing with me. I'm actually from New York. I'm from Long Island. Now I'm in Alaska. So
that's a change.
Vastly different.
By way of Florida.
Vibe. Yeah, by way of Florida, it gets real confusing. But being somewhere where no one knows any like preconceived notions about me, it's
freeing.
It's very freeing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's going to come across very interestingly in Firewall. Just seeing Seven of Nine's journey in that as well.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell that there's a feeling of relief that comes through the moment she starts dealing with people who aren't reflexively pulling away from her. The moment she starts dealing with people who, like the Fenris Rangers are this weird motley bunch who are basically going to take anybody who signs up. They need all the help they can get. They need every qualified, skilled hand they can get in their mission. And they're basically not going to judge her based on what she looks like or her implants. Not everybody even really recognizes what those implants are yet. Because again, ex-Borg are not a common thing yet in this, at this point in Star Trek continuity. So she's able to find herself a new safe place, a new place to be integrated into and accepted. And then even once people begin to realize what she is, by that point, she's already won them over.
Just in my mind, the people who don't know, like, that Seven is an ex-Borg, I mean, look at people like Geordi. They have implants. They have crazy tech and things like that built in.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was in that scenario, if I didn't know that they were Borg, I would think, oh, they have something wrong with their eyes.
Yeah, or with Seven and her implant, you would just think, oh, she's got some sort of weird medical implant for neurological reasons.
Yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, aside from that, there's not much visibly different about her. At least not until you wear off some of her outer skin and you find out there's this black and silver layer of Borg synthetic tissue underneath the surface that makes her extremely tough. But if you don't see that, if you don't see her when she's seriously injured, you don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had a chance to talk to a few authors in a few different universes, and we've actually enjoyed asking them the question about, do you find writing in these pre-existing universes, because you're writing for Star Trek, that universe has been around for a while, do you find writing for this pre-existing universe to be freeing or limiting with your creativity as an author?
It's actually very freeing. It's the more developed a fictional shared universe becomes, such as Star Trek, over the course of the last, what is it, 55? We're coming up on 60 years pretty soon.
Yeah.
The more you establish about the universe, the more dramatic questions it raises. For instance, for every fact you establish, there becomes a question of, well, then what if? Or, well, how did that happen? Or what was the outcome of that? And every one of these questions can become a springboard to a new story. And I find that the more developed the universe becomes, the more the relationships become entwined, the more you begin to realize the interactions between characters, the backstories that lace together and form this tapestry of narrative. The more complex it becomes, the more possibilities you see in it. At least that's how it is for me. I don't find the wealth of continuity to be in any way an impediment to creativity. In many ways, I find it to be a spur to creativity. I find myself sometimes looking at things in continuity where you'd say, well, that seems like a contradiction. This seems to contradict that. How do you reconcile that? Well, the question, how do you reconcile these two things, again, can, in and of itself, be the springboard to a new story idea. An example of that is a book I wrote a number of years ago called Zero Sum Game, part of the Star Trek Typhon Pact miniseries of books. And it was intended to be an in-depth look at the Breen Confederacy. And one of the funny things about the Breen in canon, most of what's been established about the Breen was established on Deep Space Nine. There were some things we learned about them from TNG, mostly the fact that they existed. And then DS9 established a bunch of facts. Voyager established a few. The funny thing was, apparently nobody was checking anybody else's notes, because a lot of the details they establish about the Breen through the course of DS9 are contradictory. You would think, well, if this is true, then why this? This should contradict that. How can this and this both be true? And it really becomes baffling when you try to figure out, how can all of this be true at the same time? And then I sat down with it and I realized that the key to understanding it was in the name of their political entity. They're a confederacy. That implies a bunch of independent states, independent political entities bound together, much like the Federation. They're in a confederation. They're like the Confederate States of America, where you have all these various polities that are part of the grand whole, and they're all subsumed under this banner of Breen Confederacy. And that's when I realized Breen is not a species. Breen is a social construct. There is no species that is the Breen. The Breen are not a species. They're a society. They're a culture, and they comprise many different species, many different races from different worlds. And the reason the masks look so weird and have all these weird functions, cooling packs and weird snouts and this strange vocalizer thing that seems to turn language into a bunch of machine noise, I realized I based them on the Kurt Vonnegut story, Harrison Bergeron. All these weird modifications are so that you don't understand. You have no clue who's under the mask. The snout is there to accommodate the Fenris, who are basically wolf-like, but the cold packs are there for the ones who come, a different species, who come from a cold planet and need to stay refrigerated, et cetera, et cetera. All these features exist for the benefit of some member of the Confederacy, but every suit has the same setup, so that when you're dealing with other people in this official capacity, nobody knows whose species is what, and everybody gets an abbreviated version of their name for work purposes, so you can't tell from the name who they are, where they're from. You can't tell from their outfit who they are, what species they are, where they're from, because it's supposed to be a meritocracy. Everybody is judged by their achievement, by their work performance. But it becomes this weird form of oppression, in that in equalizing everybody, we've also stripped everybody of identity. We've reduced everybody to this homogenized social construct in the name of fairness and equality and meritocracy, but at the same time, we have taken away everything that made all these people interesting. And so there's a whole subculture of Breen who rebel, who won't wear the masks, who live underground. So I developed this whole thing, and I realized that the way to make it all true was to say it is all true. just not all true for every single member. And that's an example where you'd say, the continuity is so weird and complex and contradictory, doesn't it tie your hands? And instead, I turned it around. I said, actually, no, it suddenly becomes the justification for something brilliant, for something more complex and more weird than you could possibly have imagined.
That is so cool. I did not anticipate getting intergalactic politics into this interview, but that is so awesome.
This is what I do.
That is amazing.
And this is why you do it so well.
Yeah.
It's probably because I love Trek and I love finding the possibilities in it.
Wow. Well, that kind of leads into the next one, and this is going to be very difficult of a question for you.
Okay.
Because you love Star Trek, you love writing, everything about that. But if David Mack was not an author, what would you be doing?
I'd probably be under a bridge in a refrigerator box, I guess. I'm not really suited to do anything else, unfortunately. I spent 17 years in the corporate sector, and it nearly broke me emotionally. I can't go back to office work. I worked mostly in editorial. I was a magazine editor, newspaper editor, freelance writer. Then I moved over to the internet side of things. And the last 8 years of my corporate life, I was the editor of sci-fi.com from around 2000 to 2008. And I just couldn't go back to it. Once I became a full-time author working from home in 2008, that's it. I just can't go back. I'm not suited to do anything else. I used to be a decent short order cook when I was young, but that is not a job to have at my age. I don't like being on my feet that long. I can't do 8-10 hours on my feet in a restaurant kitchen. I'm not suited for that anymore. I like cooking, but not as a profession. It's one of those things where, as I've gotten older, I've realized not everything you love doing needs to be monetized. Not every hobby or interest needs to be a side hustle. I love cooking, and I enjoy doing it at home for my wife and making dishes for my friends and whatever. I don't want to go back to cooking professionally. I don't ever want to work in a restaurant kitchen again. I don't want to do that. My wife and I, as a hobby, sometimes when she's not working herself to death, we like to make gelato at home. We bought an ice cream maker and we're practicing with some recipes because we loved the gelato that we had when we visited Italy. And there's a couple of really good gelato places here in New York. So we decided to learn how to make gelato at home. And at one point, we'd come back from a vacation, and I was talking about, there were gelato places down there, but they weren't what I was hoping for. I said, it almost makes me wish we could just move down there. We could open a little gelato shop. And I was dreaming up all the flavors of gelato that we would make and everything else. And then I stopped and I thought about it, and I was like, that's a lot of hard work. And suddenly you're trapped in the back of this gelato store making gelato 12, 14 hours a day, and you're paying for rent and you're paying for insurance, and you got to deal with health inspectors, and you got to source all your ingredients and materials, and you're dealing constantly with cost overruns, and then you got to hire employees, and you got labor, and you got insurance, and you got state laws, and you got federal laws, and I'm like, no, I don't want to. No, I just want to make a nice thing of hazelnut gelato at home and eat it. That's really all I want to do. So, I'm just going to be happy. I will cook a nice meal for my wife and my friends. We'll make some gelato and we'll share it with people who come over. But I don't need to make a side hustle of it. But the long version of this is I'm not suited to do anything else. This is all I'm really good at. So if I wasn't doing this, I can't imagine what else I would do with my time, where else I would go, what else I would do. Can't think of anything. I'm not a good musician. I love music. Can't play to save my life. Figured that out young. I got lucky. Like every freshman in film school, I had a guitar. Fortunately, I figured out before the end of my freshman year that I was never going to be a great guitarist. I might become competent, but I was never going to be great. I might have been able to develop some skill with practice. What I realized I didn't have was talent. I don't have musical talent, and I can't sing. I can't hold a goddamn note, and I can't find a key. You know, I'm useless for that. So I couldn't have been a musician. As much as I wanted to be a rock star and play arena rock and put out power chords and hear the adulation of the audience, that was not in the cards. I'm not going to be a rock star. I'm not going to be a super chef. No, this is all I am. This is all I am.
That's so valid and relatable.
It is definitely relatable.
Yeah.
I'm not suited to do anything else. I mean, I'm pretty detail oriented, but I'm not good at math. I can't be an accountant. I mean, maybe I could manage something, but I wouldn't enjoy it. I mean, I could be a good producer. I mean, I've produced short films. I'd be a good producer, but if I do it in TV, a TV producer is a writer. I mean, I could be a film producer, I guess, if I wasn't a writer. I could produce things instead of writing them. I'm good at that. I'm good at organizational details, running things, being, in charge of budgets, personnel, material, schedules. I can do that. If I had to do anything, maybe I would be a film producer, or maybe I'd be a film editor. Those are the only other two possible professions that I can imagine my particular skill set and my personality are suited for. So producer or film editor.
Oh, there you go.
So you touched on it a little bit, that you did have a couple of things that you enjoy doing, but as a group, we kind of realized that ever since 2020, the year that wasn't, we've become more appreciative of the need for self-care and being present in the moment. So when you don't have your next project on your desk, what do you do to take care of yourself in your downtime? What do you do to recharge your batteries?
Well, my wife and I are the keeper of a clouder of cats. So we have 3 furry little beasts that are basically our family. I love to dote on my beasts. If I'm looking for something to do that's just enjoyable, I like to collect movies. I'm a big sort of movie buff. And if I find a movie I really love, I will go to the trouble of buying it in 4K, Ultra HD, or whatever best format I can get. I've built a pretty nice home entertainment system, at least as good as I can get it within the confines of a New York City apartment, with Dolby Atmos sound and a nice big 4K screen. And so I love to just kick back. I love to watch movies and experience stories. I also just, as from childhood on, I've always loved to read. So if there's nothing else, there's always other authors' books. I'm a big fan of F. Paul Wilson, his Repairman Jack books. I'm a big fan of my friend James Swallow. His Mark Dane thrillers are some of the best thrillers out there, bar none. I mean, we're talking Bourne material. Jason Bourne, move out of the way. Here comes Mark Dane. Clear out of the way, sir. I like Richard Kadri's Sandman Slim books are some of the best contemporary urban fantasy adventure there is. So I love his stuff. And then there's books like Spear by Nicola Griffith. What amazing prose. Just such a gorgeous book. She takes Arthurian legend of like the Grail Quest, reimagines it by saying, what if Sir Percival was a woman? And then in addition to this conceit, she basically rethinks and reimagines the Arthurian legend by bringing in elements of Celtic and Welsh culture, language, and mythology. She factors in the fact that the Roman colonization of Britain occurred around the same period of time. So she factors in the effects of Roman occupation in the British Isles. And most important, she is able to incorporate characters who have disability or queerness or neurodivergence of some kind. And she shows how they would have continued to be functional members of society and even heroic figures, who basically are not impeded by their difference. They simply find a way to exist, and their difference just becomes part of who they are. So it's a great look And it challenges our notions of what a person had to be heroic in that era, and also just what that era was and what it looked like, and what the level of cultural intermingling was. So it's a remarkable book in terms of the scope of its vision of that setting and that time period and the cultures and the way they all sort of interweave and affect one another, and the prose, the beauty of the language with which she does it is stunning. It is just it's humbling to read something that beautiful and think, I will never write anything this beautiful ever. I mean, I write stories that I think are effective, and I try to do them in my style, which is a relatively invisible, I hope, form of prose that allows the story to come through without overweighting the prose. But if I were aiming for gorgeous prose, I would wish to be touched by the same magic that touched Nicola Griffith.
I made the exclamation before because I'm 99% sure my wife has read some of her work and just raves about how fantastic it is.
It's
brilliant. So I trust you that it is very good.
Adding her books to my TBR.
There we go.
And my TBR that is 900 pages long.
Yep, that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
So
life is so short, but book lists are so long.
I know. And then every time I read a book and I read a series, and then somebody's like, "Oh, hey, you liked that series. Here's 3 others." I'm like,
right. Exactly.
Okay. Oh.
You mentioned a whole bunch of authors and some of the books that you absolutely love. And one of the things we'd like to ask is kind of like potential origins and futures of who or what were some of the inspirations that got you into writing, and what would be some advice that you would give for aspiring authors?
Let's see. Authors whose work inspired me in my youth. My love of science fiction in literature was fueled by the work of Ray Bradbury, I think, more than just about anybody else. I mean, I read a lot of the sort of classic authors of that period of science fiction, people like Asimov, Heinlein, Clarke, Blish, but it was really Bradbury who was my go-to, whose vision and whose style of writing really captured my imagination and made me love science fiction. But the author whose just pure poetry of language really made me aspire to put words on a page, which I'd always wanted to do. I'd always wanted to be a writer, but the one who really sort of, whose work really spoke to me and still does, was Richard Brautigan. He was one of the last of the beat authors of the 60s and 70s. Never made a lot of money, died poor, nearly bankrupt, committed suicide. But he wrote all these really beautiful books during his time. He also wrote volumes of poetry, some of which I have. But I have a whole bunch of his books, some of them in first editions that I've found during my travels. I have at least one copy of every one of his novels. And I've got copies of most of his volumes of poetry, at least most of the ones you can find. He had a gift for personifying and anthropomorphizing inanimate objects and forces. He had a beautiful way with descriptive language. He also had a sense of how to tell very deeply human and emotional stories, even though they were couched in surrealist settings or imagery or even magical realism to a degree. And I really just loved so much of his work. In particular, one of his novels is called In Watermelon Sugar. And to give you an idea of the kind of world that he would concoct, in the story of In Watermelon Sugar, the primary narrator is a character who is described as not having a regular name. He says, I am one of those people who doesn't have a regular name. And there's a whole chapter devoted to this concept where he gives examples like, that feeling when you're thinking about a friend and then suddenly the phone rings and it's your friend calling you. That's my name. Or you're eating something and it's really good, and for a moment you forget what it is that you're eating, but you still know that it's good. That is my name. And so on. And he goes through all these sort of different sort of experiences, and you realize that he's telling you associate these feelings and emotions with this concept of character. And in that fictional universe, the sun shines a different color based on the day of the week. So each day of the week, the sun is a different color. And watermelon seeds that are planted, on those days will yield watermelons of that color. And watermelons of different colors have different magical properties. And then he's got all these sort of weird characters who have weird relationships between the main character and a girl named Margaret, who he doesn't really love, and then another girl who he does really love. And there's that sort of weird triangle going on, push and pull. And then there's this gang of weird guys who are led by a villain named Inboil, and they live out at the Forgotten Works in a place called I-Death, which is lowercase I, capital Death. This was before the era of Apple, so I'm not sure what this is all about. This is essentially, the weirdness, and there's something all about, in ancient times there were the tigers and this and that and the other thing, and there were artifacts and things left over from the Forgotten Works in the before time, and there's the watermelons and all these sort of kooky side characters. It's the strangest book, but I love it. I absolutely love it. And it's funny, I would never write that way. It's not in any respect anything like anything I would ever write, but it's what I love.
Just your description of the book sent me through like 5 different mental whiplashes. So,
yeah.
What was the name of this book again? Watermelon Sugar? Or
In Watermelon Sugar.
In Watermelon Sugar. I'm writing this down.
By Richard Brautigan. Brautigan.
Oh, yeah, here it is. There you go. I need to read this book.
Yes,
oh my God.
It's a beautiful book. It's beautiful. It's sometimes funny. It's sometimes weird. And sometimes it's also profoundly sad. And it's a great example of the emotional range that Brautigan could bring to his work, and as well as the surrealism and the beauty.
That sounds really cool. I will also be adding that to my ever-growing TBR. My poor TBR.
It's also a very short book. You can read through it really quick.
There you go.
It's a skinny little book.
Good. So, David, we had told you we'd keep you about an hour, and we are already past that. But we have one more question for you. We have one more because we decided as a group that when you grow up, people just don't ask you cool questions anymore. When you're a kid, it's the, hey, can your tennis shoes make you run faster? And so there was one question in particular that we realized we were really sad we didn't get asked anymore. So, David Mack, what is your favorite dinosaur?
I knew that was coming.
It's a good question, though.
I felt it, though. I mean, when I was a kid, I was sort of torn. I was like a Triceratops guy or a Stegosaurus guy. Everybody else, they were all about the T-Rex, but I'm like, that seems like it's too easy. It's too pat. What I loved was the design. And what you got the Triceratops as well, like those cool forward horns and that gigantic sort of, that big sort of, thing behind its head. That's awesome. But the Stegosaurus with that tail with, the thagomizer of spikes at the end. How do you choose between that? I mean, Stegosaurus also has like the cool fins on the back. It's very Godzilla. It's very proto-Godzilla. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to pick between Triceratops and Stegosaurus, man. Those two, they're both really, really awesome beasts. I guess just for visual impact, I'd have to go Triceratops.
That's a solid answer. And solid reasoning behind that answer.
That's just,
we've had people who've done
a dramatic creature,
Oh, yeah.
Plus, you can imagine riding on the back and you got that giant thing as a forward shield and you can peek out behind it and duck, so it's a great sort of a dinosaur steed. Whereas if you're trying to ride a Stegosaurus, you're riding on these rough fins. First of all, that's crotch injury right there, plus no shield. So I'm going to go Triceratops for that other reason.
You use a Triceratops as a mount. I mean, the crest will be...
You put a howdah on the back, you put a howdah on there, and then you can duck behind its frill, and it's got horns. You can charge into battle with it, and it'll protect you from incoming fire. It's great.
I might need to change my D&D character's mount.
You should.
I might have to have them... I might have to see if my GM will write dinosaurs into it.
If you give the Triceratops armor, barding like he'd give to a horse, you can bard the frill to protect your mount, so that it can take incoming fire without your mount getting hurt, and that shield becomes even more effective. See, that's awesome.
I think you would really enjoy the video game called Ark, where the whole thing is basically you build a little fort and then you capture dinosaurs.
Okay.
And one of the things you can do is get a Triceratops to ride.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. Somebody thought about this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
I love it.
That is great. That's a very interesting answer. I don't think anyone's ever gone that in depth with that question before.
No.
Well, I mean, it's important to engage with these things seriously. I mean,
yeah.
You got to really think if you're going to stick with an answer, you got to know why you're sticking with the answer.
And I mean, we've had people say that the T-Rex was their favorite, and then refer to them as the pumpkin spice of dinosaurs, and I'm like, no.
No, it's the unchallenged of dinosaurs. It's the dinosaur that can't get to the remote control.
Just the joke from Meet the Robinsons of, I got a big head and little arms.
Weird movie.
There's an interesting thing about the Stegosaurus of why it's called the Thagomizer.
Yeah, it's because of the Far Side cartoon. The thing that kills Thag is called the Thagomizer, and then real dinosaur scientists realized they didn't have a better name for it, so they picked it up and said, Thagomizer it is.
I love that you know that. So many people don't know that, and I find it hilarious that actual scientists went, I mean, we don't have a thing for that. Sure, Thagomizer, done.
Yeah, that's as good as anything. We'll take it.
It's so great. Oh, man.
Oh, David, we have enjoyed having you on the show so much with us today.
It's been fun. I'm just sorry Tim had to miss it. But I'm glad for the reason that he did.
That's true. Where can our viewers and our listeners go to find out more about you and your work and your upcoming book?
Well, aside from your local bar or watering hole, let's say my official website, davidmack.pro. That's David Mack, M-A-C-K. .pro. And if you want to find me on social media, on Facebook, my official author page is facebook.com/TheDavidMack. And I don't really use my Twitter account anymore because Elon Musk is kind of a fascist dipshit. Pardon my language.
Mm-hmm.
Understandable.
So I mostly use Blue Sky for my micro posting these days, and I am David Mack, D-A-V-I-D, M-A-C-K, all one word, lowercase, on Blue Sky, and you can find me over there. And I'm pretty easy to find. You put in David Mack and or Star Trek, and I pop right up.
Awesome. Well, we are definitely going to link your website as well as your socials so that our viewers and our listeners can go and find out what you got coming up.
Much appreciated.
Remember, folks, subscribing is the most important thing you could do to ensure you get more amazing guests like David Mack here, and funny moments that you can listen to. So really helps out the channel. Please subscribe, like and comment below as well. Check out our Patreon, and don't forget to check us out on Good Pods or any of your other audio podcast providers.
And don't forget to check out David's work and find his latest book, Firewall, coming to stores near you. You said February 27th? Tuesday, the 27th of February, 2024. Awesome. Well, thanks again, David. This has been an amazing conversation. I've had a blast. It's been a lot of fun being here. Thank you for having me on. Thank you. All right, guys. And for the FSF Popcast, that's it. Goodbye. Bye.
Copyright 2024 FSF Popcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Popcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpopcast.com.